It's fine. Day one of World Football Summit. Put up your hands if you're having a good time. Obviously, who's going to keep their hands down? There are cameras on you guys, of course. We've got a fantastic panel, optimization of technology and data in football today. But before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I just want to tell you a little story. About 7 years ago, I was invited up to a major football federation. I won't say who it was. And they invited me to give my thoughts on data. I'd been working over a decade back then in data analytics, performance analytics on the pitch. It was a fascinating meeting. It lasted over 3 hours, and most of it was a discussion around video samples and data sets that I was showing and giving my view on trends in the world of football. And everyone was engrossed. It was fantastic. And one of the main guys there, he said, "Daniel, this sounds fantastic. You're really opening our eyes to a lot of things we never thought of before." He says, "I want to ask you a question." I said, "Of course." He said, "Over the last, let's say, 30 years of top-tier football, is there one thing, you've showed us a lot of statistics, a lot of data, is there one thing that you can point at that successful teams do more than non-successful teams? Is there one thing, Daniel?" he asked me. And I said, "Yes, actually there is." And he opened his eyes, he leaned in, he says, "What is it?" I said, "They score more goals than the other team." And of course, there was a little bit of laughter in the room. I didn't get the contract. But I got a good story, at least. But what I then went on to explain was true back then, just as it is today. There is no magic bullet. When you're talking about technology, when you're talking about data, there's not one thing that you can do that will solve all your dreams. Just with life, just with any business, in football, it's even more true. There is no substitute for experience and professionalism and sticking to an objective for the long term. Not one thing, but a combination of many things that you need to do together to really make magic happen. And if we're talking about professionalism and experience, I'm very, very proud to present two of our panelists, and I would ask, please, even those in the cheap seats, to welcome them with rapturous applause. First of all, CTO of the Portuguese Football Federation, Hugo Freitas. You see, when he walks slowly, he wants you to keep clapping until he actually sits down. And secondly, one of my favorite founders, the CEO and founder of Horizon, Pedro Mestriner. Right, so, feeling good, guys?
Yes.
Excellent. So let's just start off with a general question, and Pedro, I'll start with you. We live in a very, very technological age, of course. Everything is about tech. To what extent do you see that today, and the panel is talking about today, that technology is being leveraged, or maybe not, in the world of football by associations, federations, clubs?
Well, thank you first, everyone, to be here, and the World Football Summit as well. I think there are two levels of, as we call, disruption happening on technology. One depends on the maturity level of the organization. We see 2 or 3 big groups that, one, as you mentioned, very deep on tech, using technology as core of the organization, and then you have other organizations doing bits and bobs somewhere, and then you have other organizations completely not looking this in the way as technology or data in general should be doing. And this, what's happening, is creating a huge gap, even bigger, as we can see now. This is not only applying on football, but in sports in general. No?
Absolutely. Actually, you touch on a very important point, that there's a growing gap. This is one of the issues, and again, not just in football, but in the world, between people who have also the funds to invest in this and people that don't, and federations that don't. And on that point, actually, let's go to you, Hugo, as the CTO of the Portuguese Football Federation. I know that obviously you're leading the tech side. How do you see generally the ability to leverage the technology that's out there? There's a lot of stuff out there. Is it being leveraged correctly?
I would say that more often than not, it is. First and foremost, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. There are certain systems that we hope to see a little bit more leveraged in the near future, especially in what concerns decision support systems. I think that we are not yet as well advised by these kind of systems as we should be. We inhabit a very, very conservative industry, which is football. I come from telco, so I would say that the difference is quite significant. But overall, I have a very positive outlook on that. So I would say that, yes, we're doing a pretty good job in terms of leveraging technology.
When we look specifically about the Portuguese Federation, I read with great enthusiasm about the program for 2030.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about that? Because I see you guys taking quite a lead as opposed to other federations, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
So we set out to create a strategic approach, a strategic document that could be followed throughout the following years up to 2030. So it's an exercise and a set of very concrete objectives and measures that we have defined in order to be able to project football in what we consider to be now already today a fully digital football. So if you think about kids today, let's say any child 6 years old, the world is already fully digital. So imagine when he is 12, or imagine when he is 14, 15, entering in the national team. So our idea is there are certain motions and certain forces that for sure are changing football. Technology for sure is one of them. We see that our kids are more and more invested into technology, and we believe that we are the right space and let's say the contrast to a digital world, to bringing that digital world into a physical world.
I think I want to stay with that concept of the children, and I think what I really like about your approach is it's not treating the kids on their own and then treating the professionals on their own. It's understanding that this is a process. You know, the kids of today are going to be the professional footballers of tomorrow. And I think that when we think about the very young kids, when they're just starting out, people of, I say our age, loosely, we're guilty of thinking that why are the kids not playing outside like we did when we were kids? And that's just not realistic. But the problem is people, I think it's a choice between either them being inside on their devices and their video games or being outside playing football in the park like we used to do. And what I am interested in seeing is how instead of thinking of tech as an interference to their development and even physical development on football, how can we use technology, because they're never going to be like we were when we were kids? How can we use technology to encourage them to go out and play and excel physically in the sport?
So first and foremost, I think we need our generation, and also using your term, speaking loosely, we need to first and foremost admit that as much as we would like to think otherwise, we really don't understand fully the younger generations. And we need to start from that point. So, and if we don't understand, let's avoid going all of us into a room and start thinking about how we would do it if we were in their shoes, because we're not. Yeah. No two generations are alike. This is a proven fact, and we just need to start by asking them, how is it that we can create a bridge, a dialogue between two generations? I have a brother that is half my age, so I'm 46, he's 23, and I watch the conversations that he has with my father, that is 74, and I think that what technology also brought was a wider gap in terms of what we normally call the generational gap. It's wider. Technology has actually accelerated that gap. So first and foremost, we need to accept that we don't fully speak their language, and we need to understand. So what we have done at the Portuguese FA is a ton of focus groups, talking to kids, asking them how we should interact with them, asking them to explain their world to us. I think it's a very humbling exercise, first and foremost, and if you do it right, you will take the right ideas and the right approach to all of this.
I think it comes down to what should always be the case, is we just don't know. We can assume we know, and then we'll be making a mistake. If we assume that we don't know, then we've got a chance of finding out. Pedro, let me ask you, we talk about technology in particular. I've been investing into sports technology startups for the last 3 years or so. And even though I'm a technology investor, and you're a sports technology founder, I always say the same mantra, that it's not about the tech. Technology doesn't exist for tech's sake. It exists to serve a purpose, whether that's to solve a problem, whether it's to create a new demand that we didn't know existed before, but it's not there for the tech's sake. But as a sports tech founder, how does that resonate with you? And then we'll go to the CTO and see how that resonates with the guy who's responsible for implementing technology in the Portuguese Federation.
I think it's resonate 100% with what we're trying to do actually as a founder. Basically, is solve a problem. The industry, regardless, let's talk about the sport industry, there are many leakage on any of the process. No? And in the end, the technology is helping to solve a commercial problem, a fan understanding problem. The goal for using the technology in our case is first to understand what is the problem to solve. It sounds very obvious, but sometimes it's not that easy.
Absolutely.
It looks like that is, okay, we're applying tech to this part of the process, but the main goal is to understand what is the problem for us, and it's the way we operate actually is let's look at all the problems and then understand if there's data. I think also there's another point is what is data? Because we are talking about tech and data, but tech in the end is just bips and bops, it's noise. It could be a quote from you now, it could be a color or whatever.
Yeah.
Without transforming this data into, let's call proper information, taking insights to agreeable truth, and then apply the innovation using tech, nothing's gonna happen. Data will stay completely separate from the tech we're saying. I think that is the biggest challenge for tech founder or even the organizations like Hugo probably mentioned now, is to understand what we're solving and how to apply, let's call the data, to solve that particular problem. No?
Absolutely. Mr. CTO.
Yeah.
So again, it all comes down to very core fundamental principles in an organization. If you go around and about the Portuguese FA and you ask any of our staff, what is our main purpose? They will pretty much give you the same answer: to have more boys and girls playing football. And how do we know that this is the right core fundamental? It's very simple. If I had only one jug of water to water something, and that is a core principle, then if I just drop water, if I water that only jug, I will for sure make all the other ones grow, right? So if we invest just in this and nothing else, let's say by absurd that we would do this, if we invest just in this and in nothing else, everything will also grow. And really, if it doesn't support that vision, if it doesn't support that idea, then it's for us, it's pretty much worthless. Again, football is not about technology. It's supported by technology, which is a very key but sometimes difficult difference or idea to explain and to come across easily to people.
Absolutely. You're my kind of CTO, focusing first on the business and second on the
For
on
sure.
the tech.
That's
For
the only
sure.
way to succeed, I would say.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's bring this down to a couple of real-life examples now. If we split football into two areas, the commercial side, Pedro, you deal mostly on the commercial side, of course, and then the performance side, what's going on the pitch. Where do you see the big opportunities? Are there particularly untapped areas that you see? Obviously, Pedro, you've got a very clear vision yourself, and I'd love you to explain it because I believe in that as well. But whether it's commercial or performance, are there specific areas that you think these are the quick wins, these are the low-hanging fruit in the next 2-3 years?
For sure, they are all correlated. Sometimes we talk about digital monetization, which is our thesis and our core, but performance as well. In the end, loss prevention of injury of a player means better performance on the pitch, means you can deliver better results commercially. That is kind of totally related. In our thesis, actually, is digital monetization. We're talking about digital assets for the last years, but what they are. Our thesis goes to understand how much they're worth, pack whatever any sports organization are doing, and then take this to market. The reason is brands evolved in the last. When I was selling a sponsorship many years ago, you go talk to a CEO or a CMO of a company, they don't understand what is a CPM or talking about digital concepts, more close to advertising. And we're talking about media exposure, only brands, brand awareness purely. Brands evolved partially because of what Hugo was saying. generation is completely changing the way they consume the content, but the sports organizations are precisely produce content all the time, but not realizing that there's a huge opportunity on the digital ads they are producing to bring brands to connect to that particular content itself that will connect to what Hugo was mentioning is what the fans are looking for. Fans are looking for RR, as we say, typical English recurrence content, and it's relevant. Sometimes they're not looking for 90 million games, but that particular piece of content is relevant. That is where the eyeballs are and the brands are looking for. No? So our thesis focus on digital monetization, clearly, and for us, that's the untapped opportunity right now.
And I think that I totally agree with that. When we think about the transition now to instead of just knowing who our customers are, we want to know what our customers are doing, know our customers' behavior. Yeah. And when we talk about leveraging that and monetizing that, I agree. I think there's a huge untapped opportunity there. And the digital people are still thinking about the billboards at the ground, the shirt sponsors. It's way more than that. We can access people all over the world through digital.
Correct. And also the aggregation of audience. In the end, now brands are evolving to this, I would say this mantra for them is not only one-to-one negotiation process, which takes a lot of time, but also is understanding what I'm looking for in southern Spain right now. Yeah. It's not necessarily only Seville and Betis. There will be content creators, there will be talents, there will be more people that can, particularly reaching that audience that the brand is looking for. That is the evolution of the traditional sponsorship, let's say, into reaching to the digital monetization. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hugo, give me your 2 cents on where are the big untapped opportunities in the next couple of years?
I always say that at the end, what shines is content, right? Independent of whatever means you have to or you use to propagate your content, to monetize it. If the content is not good, then it's not going to succeed, no matter how much effort and technology you put into it. First and foremost, on the content side, because I believe it's important for this conversation, I think that we are still stuck to some old models. We have yet to come to grips with the reality that younger generations might not be inclined to watch 90 minutes of football. I mean, I know that a lot of people in this room might think this is kind of some form of sacrilege, and at the end, it is. But it's reality. It's harsh reality, and we need to wake up to that reality before it's too late. We at the Portuguese FA, we always thought that the best approach is consider yourself while you're at the top of the mountain, you should actually think, how is it that you're going to stop yourself from getting dragged back down or falling over, right? So we do not assume for 1 second that football is eternal, that football is forever, and that the younger generations will love it as much as we do. We don't assume that, and that I think, and with a very high degree of certainty that would be a tragic mistake. So to give you an example of how I think we're kind of still stuck. Internal discussion, why don't we take a famous YouTuber, give him a match of ours, and let him just talk and say, yeah, but what is he going to do? Is he going to narrate the game? No, he's not going to narrate the game. He's going to talk with his audience. The game will be on the background. He will probably talk about the game and let the audience, or otherwise people that would not turn on football, just let it be part of the conversation, let it be part of their day-to-day topic. We are constantly bombarded by information 24/7, nonstop. Our days, at least mine, I don't know about yours, but mine still has 24 hours, and the amount of content keeps growing and growing and growing. So if you really want to stand out, you need to unstuck yourself and think differently. This doesn't mean that we will abandon traditional formats or more modern formats, but this does mean that we have to look at this in a different perspective. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. Decision support systems, decision support systems, decision support systems. This is crucial for us within the next years. And we really need to pay attention to that.
I totally agree with the approach. And going back to what you said just before, we're talking about layering extra content on the background. Instead of having this continued two-dimensional flat screen both metaphorically and physically, sending us this game. Talking about layering the content, and what I've been quite focused on the last few years as well is how to make that a two-way dialogue between the user and the content itself, not just constantly pushing them information, which, as you say, there's only a certain amount that they can consume, but getting them more involved. I know that, you know, my son, he has to be involved in something to be fully engaged in it, and I think that's when we understand that this generation is very different from us. And I'm becoming a bit like that. Or maybe I'm just pretending to be a young man again, I don't know. But I can't also just consume something without zoning out these days. So.
When AWS bought Twitch for $900 million, everybody thought that they had gone mad.
Yeah.
And, well, they didn't.
Yeah, it looks so for sure. Okay, so we'll talk about data a little bit now. Pedro, you touched on something that I think is really important to delve into a little bit. It's not just about a data set and what we do with it. It's about the combination of data sets. Football is the one game in the middle. And then there are plenty of data sets around it, whether it's the data set on our season ticket holders, the ticketing, the food and beverage, merchandising, how they engage on social. It should be obvious to everyone that these are inherently linked data sets. But what I see is people working in silos too often, where someone in charge of one data set will not even be considering how that interlinks with another person's data set. And this is nothing short of tragic for me, because if you don't maximize, we talk about maximizing and optimizing our data, if you don't maximize the combination, you really miss a big opportunity, from my point of view as someone working in data for many years. Pedro, I'd like to get your opinion.
Well, there are probably two reasons for that. First, I think it happens also in other industries, but the sport particularly is stronger. Where there's something new that comes in the market, let's call ticketing, whatever, the organization literally goes and rush up and talk to Hugo, like find out the best vendor, go there and plug in, so then they have the solution. Happens the same with analyticals or on this side, so look the best vendor, go and plug in, and then you start to have specialized companies building that kind of Frankenstein in the end that you cannot understand what is going on. And the commercial side, which we try to do, is precisely this. Go from A to Z in the process. Understanding precisely content, even though we are not a content organization, but that is the pillar for everything. But I can tell in a lot of examples that commercial department is not even aware what the content is being produced. It's like it doesn't matter in the end. You know, I think that is one of the biggest things is happening is completely disconnected conversations. And by different, as you mentioned, business units. And in the commercial side, precisely our focus, it's very clear on that. Nobody's even knows sometimes delivery, partnerships, etc. What's going on content? I don't know. What's happening on ticketing? You have the fund date on that ticketing. Can we use this to improve our commercial performance? No, let's not talk to them. These are ticketing guys. These are merchandising guys, licensing. We try to tackle at least the commercial side, but it still should be more connected, and I agree with you on with other business units on the organization. It should be a natural thing to happen, actually.
It should be. And you're talking from a provider looking from the outside in.
Yeah.
Hugo, how do you respond to that? You, as the person inside, on the side of the federation, where a provider here is saying everything seems so disconnected or disparate. Do you agree with that? And if so, how do you solve that problem?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, I would say more. It's not enough to have a vision. You also have to have an operation, a tactic at the end of the day to use all of this combined. All of these data points, all the information that you're gathering. So what we did at Portuguesa FA, we actually created a unit that specializes in all of this. So all the data that's being generated and gathered and treated, it's being analyzed by this single business unit that is in charge of creating this bridge between all the different other units. And it's pretty much the name we gave it, it's actually quite revealing. We call it customer care and intelligence. Okay. So the idea behind customer care and intelligence is exactly that. So how is it that we make data that we get from ticketing, data that we get from the commercial side, all in one? And also how do we alongside with this, diversify different sources of revenue. I would risk saying that for the majority of federations, the vast majority of revenue comes from business to business. So who's looking at business to consumer, right? So one might think that, well, ticketing is a big source of revenue. It is, for clubs, for instance. Maybe not so much for national associations or for federations. Again, my strongest advice would be create a unit, surround yourself with people that have as their sole purpose to understand how the different units work together, what is it that they do, how they interconnect with each other, so that you can provide meaningful information and knowledge.
Isn't that, I mean, I've been working with data for many, many years, and I think that a lot of people don't understand that there are some rather boring challenges that sometimes block everything. If we take different data sets from a few different providers, cleaning that data, integrating it so that it can actually be held in one database, and I'm going a little bit into the whole data side here, but it is a major challenge, and often there's this concept of, yes, we'll have a centralized database and learn fantastic things, but the reality is not that simple.
No, it's actually quite complicated. Integrations, the different sources of data that you receive, the necessary consistency and data cleaning that you need to do prior to using it. I mean, we are better now than we ever were before. There are new technologies and new approaches to integrate all this data that is so disparate amongst itself. And we're better, but we're leaps and bounds away of being good. Yeah. And I think that's also, it creates a lot of entropy within the entire analysis process. So you have data scientists on one side saying, we need this, and we need this, and we need this. And then we're talking on the other side with data providers trying to integrate that as fast as possible, because our data scientists need that data to provide us answers and steering. And again, I think that there are quite some interesting technologies out there. Hopefully they'll get better in a very near future. We desperately need them to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the things that's going through my mind when I listen to you speak, I'm thinking, well, here's a man who's part of an organization with a clear vision, and also with the tools, the people, and the funds to be able to do that. Sometimes I'll speak to associations in developing nations, and I mean, you know, we talk about grassroots that don't even have grass. I mean, so how do we possibly bridge that gap? You know, thinking about you need the vision, and then you need the tools to do it, and other nations not even a chance at the moment.
I actually have a very, oddly enough, a very optimistic outlook on that, in the sense that what technology has shown us throughout the years, it has a certain tendency to become massified and distributed throughout the masses. So in doing so, it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. In all honesty, I'm not so concerned about that. I am more concerned about the gap of human knowledge that is necessary to interpret data or to convert data into information and knowledge. We had that issue in Portugal. This is why we created the Portugal Football School. And because we understood that, okay, the Portuguese FA, we can substitute ourselves to our regional associations and say, here, there you go, there's a package of technology, use it, right? And what would happen is they wouldn't use it because they wouldn't know how. So we created a school to pass along knowledge that we acquire, to also exchange ideas, because there's always a very different perspective from an operational standpoint that we also gain from, right? And that's what concerns me more. It's not so much that eventually of some product there will be a cheaper version of, or even a freemium version of, eventually it will come, right? But the ability to interpret the data, it's not so easy.
Pedro, what do you think about that?
Well, I 100% agree on that. I think he tackled one of the points that for us, you know, creating the tech on this is try to make this useful somehow. Not only have a lot of technology, machine learning, all the things all the time, but how can someone on this process of different maturity level of understanding the data, can use this and take action on that. That is the key thing for us when developing a tech company, because the tech is available. Kind of, I would say, beside sending people to Mars, the rest is a commodity, I would say, today, in terms of building technology. But how you make this for the user of this, for this technology, simple, understandable with actionable things, that is the key challenge for, I would say, especially coming in sport tech companies, is the key element for that as well. Make it simple products.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, yeah.
The old principle that always rings true for sure. So we can talk forever about the benefits of technology. Let's talk about the potential downsides as well. Let's not pretend everything is great. Do you guys have any examples of where technology has been a bit of a hindrance in football? A lot of people talk, I'll throw VAR in there, from a fan perspective. But, that's just one thing we can talk about. But either you want to respond on VAR or bring some examples of your own.
Sure, not a problem. I wouldn't say, in fact, I would say the opposite. I wouldn't say that VAR has become an interest to football, but I do understand where you're coming from. With VAR, we have corrected a lot of negative aspects that football had that derived from very clear and obvious mistakes that referees would make. As human as they are, they're of course prone to mistakes, and some of them would be very difficult for people at home, especially at home, or even at the stadium, to understand how is it possible that I could see this and this referee did not. And VAR for sure brought that, but it also brought some dissatisfaction in terms of stoppage times and how people, the frustration that your team just scored a goal and now you're waiting for a guy on the pitch that is going like this because he's waiting for the goal to be checked so that he can restart the match. However, that's much more a question of perception than it is of reality. So we did a study at the Portugal Futebol Observatory that analyzed, if memory serves me right, 6 moments where the ball stops, right? So I think it was VAR, it was goal kicks, free kicks, and some others. Funny enough, and contrary to public perception, VAR was responsible for the least amount of time lost in the game, but it would induce the most frustration, right? So I think we have some work to do in that area for sure. I think we need to understand a little bit more about behavior psychology and the way that we give information out to the public to manage that frustration. Coming to a very classical example, the subway. You might wait easily 20 minutes for a subway, as long as you know that you are waiting for 20 minutes. But if you wait for 3...
I live in Israel. I've been waiting 30 years for this.
Okay. But if you wait for 3, then you actually, and you don't know the amount of time that you're waiting for, sure, you actually become very frustrated. And I think this is it's a relationship that we're still learning to manage with our audience, with our fans. And we're getting better for sure, not only speeding up the decision process, which we have consistently done throughout these 5 years, on our way to the 6th, but also in the way that we supply information to the audience.
I will say one thing. I do think that VAR, it's interesting what you said. I didn't know that VAR is guilty of far less stoppages than other areas. But I remember when I was younger, we used to talk amongst us, say, isn't it amazing there's not many things that force you out of your seat in this world, but a goal for your team forces you out of your seat. It's an involuntary reaction. Mm-hmm. And for me, even though I was very much in favor of VAR, I feel like it's ruined that. It doesn't force me out of my seat. And I care a bit less about the stoppage time of free kicks and things like that. And that, now it's like you're on the edge of your seat. Is it really go? Oh, yes, okay. And so there's a difference, I think.
For sure, fully agree. But there are also people that now get up twice.
Yeah.
Is it as in falling?
Yeah,
Is that one time?
it's a goal. Oh my God, it's not a goal. Oh, it's a goal again, right? So you also have that side of the coin. But yeah, I do understand where you're coming from, and it's always a balance. I mean, it's a little bit like security. It's always a balance between usability and how secure things are. And this is also what we're learning to do, managing information towards the audience better, and also creating a better balance with the audience in terms of stoppages and perception of information.
Pedro, any example of technology that has been a hindrance or an interference to football?
I think the abuse of data sometimes.
Okay.
We talk about data. In the end, in our cases, we have hundreds and hundreds of data points that sometimes, I would say not for the sport in general, but doesn't matter commercial or the performance side, the abuse of data sometimes generates confusion and paralysis on any decision. So that's the reason as well of making it simple, the whole process, because otherwise the data, as we're saying, is not an issue now. But it's overload of data, you can generate either wrong decisions or stoppage as well on the decisions, because you have different data points on that. And I think that is a very important thing, that data usage should be used with care as well.
Absolutely.
And,
I mean, one of the things that frustrates me is that there's a lot of companies out there that they say they're statistics companies, but they're not really statistics companies, they're just information companies.
Correct.
And you can read anything into a data set that you want, really, but there's a difference between information that's statistically viable. Otherwise, you will just say, well, look at this. If a team has 4 successful corners from one side and only 1 successful corner from the other side in one game, does that mean we're better from that side or not? It means nothing. There's not enough of a sample here. And people sometimes read too much into the data. That is an abuse of data that I see all the time. So definitely. And the problem is that it takes a lot of data to become statistically viable, and people are anxious. They don't want to wait for that. But of course they should. If they want to base it on their decisions on good information, that's what they should be doing. So we're running out of time. So I'm just going to manipulate the situation now. As being an investor, I'm going to take a couple of hints from you guys in your esteemed positions. Where should we think about putting our money in technology, in sports tech? And you're not allowed to say Horizon.
Yes.
Where are the big wins in the next 5-10 years for a technology investor? Let's say just like myself.
Well, no doubt for me, if only one choice allowed, then I would say that you should invest in any system that can support business side decisions. And I'm not just talking about what is peripheral to the game, but also inside of the game. I see in a very near future, for instance, referees being assisted by machines that will provide them similar plays with the decisions that their colleagues took for those plays, and using them to decide in real time. So it's I would put my money there next 5 years for sure.
Fantastic, thank you. Noted. Pedro?
Well, besides the digital assets, naturally,
of course,
probably the wearables to understand play performance.
interesting.
I think that is one of the elements that is you can see in big organizations using very strongly to apply this to the commercial performance. And wearables, understanding injury prevention, all these kind of things that sometimes is very separated from commercial. I think definitely now using not only the data points, but understanding all not the wearables itself, but the data you can get this, transform into knowledge and apply this to commercial. I would probably go in this besides, of course, these digital assets,
I think that's a really interesting point. It opens up a whole different discussion that hopefully we'll have another panel on that at some stage, is how to combine the commercial aspect of football with the performance. Correct. And they're so often treated as 2 very separate areas. I do believe that one supports the other and must do. But gentlemen, thank you so much, Pedro, Hugo, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And have a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Hugo.